Welcome to the Bedrock Engineers podcast, bringing you robot combat discussions for people who don't know what they're talking about.
It's carnage here in the Battlebots! Oh! Huge hit there! Now he's a fire-breathing dragon! Hey! Hold on! Woo! I feel like I'm in a scene from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre! Getting, we're gonna need a bot medic!
Here are your hosts, Ben and Scott. All right. Oh man, like it's just now really sinking in. Like Scott, we have guests, like plural.
That's awesome.
Actual Roboteers. There's two of them on this podcast for the
That's
first
great.
time ever. Everybody, I am very happy to introduce Zachary Goff, the team captain of Copperhead. Say hi, Zach.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here.
Along with Robert Cowan, who you all may know from his YouTube channel. Say hi, Rob.
Hello, Robert.
So I think we should start, Scott and I, as always, with follow-up. And if you guys have anything to say, please weigh in if you would like. The reason Captain Shredderator didn't have any spare parts, turns out, was because they were an alternate. They weren't planning on competing in this season.
Okay.
But Chomp, I think it was Chomp, actually dropped out because Zoe Stevenson had a baby around the time of filming. And they were like, okay, we'll do it. So they didn't bring any spares. So that's that.
Well,
And the reason they died in their fight was apparently because the electromagnets that they have underneath the machine to keep it more stable turned on and wouldn't turn off, so they were stuck to the floor. I did not know that it had those.
that's interesting.
I've never in my life heard that Captain Shredderator had magnets.
How do they work?
I don't know. I mean,
What's the purpose of the electromagnets?
well, like when they hit something, I'm guessing they turn them on to keep them on the floor and not so they don't fly around like full body spinners are wont to do sometimes.
That's interesting.
Yeah, there's actually a middle or a high school team that used to go to Robo Games with a middleweight. I forget what that was called. They're based out of Texas too. But yeah, they used electromagnets on their full body spinner, and it worked great. So
Oh yeah.
It makes
we
sense,
just needed
man.
to scale it up, and yeah.
How do you time something like that? Like, how do you know when to actually? Because if you turn on the electromagnets and you can't drive while they're on, you have to wait for the other guy to come to you, right?
Yep. Yeah, so I guess you gotta time it. Yep.
What we're
Wait
learning
for the
here
other
is
Charge you and just engage. Stuck to the floor.
so what you're saying is Melty Brain Master Race.
Apparently, that's the only solution left.
Come on, Greg. Legalize Melty Brains. Hashtag legalize Melty Brains 2020. Let's start the uprising. All right, and the other piece of follow-up, Scott, if you would please reach behind the computer there. I've got an object for you to look at that I've been keeping hidden this whole time. That, my friend, is a piece of HDPE plastic.
Interesting.
So that is the stuff that Gabriel's wheels were made of from Robot Wars, and Huge's wheels are made out of UHMW, which is extremely similar to that. So if you want to try and bend it, you'll see that is properly tough stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very
but
easy to plastically deform, meaning that it won't go back exactly to how it was.
this was huge. His wheels were made out of this stuff?
Yes. It's
Yeah,
the kind
well.
of stuff you see cutting boards be made out of.
Yeah, well, I'm telling you, man, when you hit it with a sledgehammer, it can still break.
Well, Huge's wheels did break, but
Yeah, they did.
that was Son of Waiachi, though.
Interesting.
Yeah, I still really thought there was a chance in that fight. I guess that's really all we have to say. So follow up over, but before we get to the episode, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that we have two Roboteers here. So y'all, if you would, please tell Scott why exposed wheels are a good thing.
Zach.
Oh, if you read the internet, you would know otherwise, Ben. No, it's actually so. I mean, implementation is everything. You can have a well-implemented exposed wheel or a poorly implemented exposed wheel. My theory, I used to always cover them up with tons of heavy armor, and you'd end up with these really narrow, skinny tires, and you got 250 pounds riding on, very small surface traction-wise. So you're spinning these tiny little wheels because they're heavily armored. You don't got weight to grow the bot any bigger, and you're just tearing up the wheels really fast. They don't get very good traction because you don't have a lot of surface contact. I mean, look at like race car tires. Those are big wide tires, and they do that for a reason, to get traction. So the battle box, it's always a balance between competing factors, protection, and offense. We wanted to go for a little more drivetrain power this year, but of course, to do that we need bigger tires, and as your tires get bigger, the armor that you would need to cover them gets bigger and heavier, and you quickly run out of weight. So what we decided to do this time is turn the tires into armor. So the tires that we got are very unique for the sport. Most people, they're using these like foam-filled tires. The stuff shreds so easily. We actually cast our own tires. So we had a mold machined out of aluminum. We used a 2-part polyurethane pour. These things are like 3 inches thick. So you got to get through 3 inches of highly cross-linked rubber. It's dense. Like these tires weigh about 20 pounds a piece. To get through that much material, it's like you're gonna have to spend an entire match just banging on those wheels to really tear them up. And they held up great. Like,
Yeah, they did.
I don't want to spoil anything, but we never really had to change a tire, and they took a lot of abuse. So
That was the first thing I noticed about y'all's robot is the wheels, the tires. They were slicks.
yeah. Well, we did want to put a little tread in them because the arena gets so nasty with just robot debris.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the paint that they use to paint the floor, it rips up pretty quickly as everyone's just constantly doing burnouts. So you've got this fine layer of paint dust all the time. So having a little tread pattern would probably help, but we just kind of ran out of time. After a little while though, your tires get so torn up it kind of creates its own tire siping, its own tread pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah, those tires are some properly chunky boys. Those are some thick wheels, and I could tell that. Even in this fight, y'all said you didn't want to spoil anything, but Scorpios did get some direct hits on the wheels, and it seemed like there was no damage to them.
No, there really wasn't. Those tires were fine after the fight. I would say they got probably maybe an inch deep into it with one of their gouges, but had no effect because they need to get through 3 inches before they even get to the core of the tire.
Yeah,
That was interesting. Did y'all show up with extra tires in case one did get damaged?
Yeah, we had two spare tires. We did end up using one because it just looked a lot nicer. One was looking pretty ragged. Still fully functional. Could have run it, but we wanted to look good for the cameras,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for that explanation. That makes a lot of sense and is
Yeah, it does.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and
and I
I'll just add. Oh, go ahead, Rob.
Oh, I was going to add one thing. So, the internet, right? The internet always wants to say is you got to protect the wheels, exactly what Zach was saying. But what people don't really understand is you got to protect the wheels with something. And what is that something? And if that something is going to end up getting bent or somehow deflected into your wheel, then the thing that was protecting your wheel now just completely destroys that drive side. And we've seen this happen a lot of times where, someone has like a little piece of metal on the outside as a wheel guard, something comes into contact with it, shoves it right into the tire, and then that whole drive side is gone. So if you're going to protect your wheels, you got to make sure that it's not a liability. And all too often, it ends up just being a liability. And we'd rather take the hit on the actual wheel and maybe have half of a wheel with tread missing than just have it locked up or bound up.
That makes good sense, man. That makes real good sense. Yeah, if you can't adequately protect them, you have created a bigger liability.
Exactly.
So with all that said and done, let's go ahead and talk about this episode, which I thought was excellent.
Yeah, I thought it was real good as well.
What did you guys think about it?
Oh yeah, Bite Force and Yeti. That was a great fight. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. That's gonna be fun to talk about when we get there.
I thought we saw some real power.
Yeah, we saw real power. We saw real power out of Copperhead for sure. Correct me if I'm wrong, but those forks, sticking out the front of Scorpios are 3/8 inch thick steel, are they not?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And they just bent up like it was nothing.
Yeah, they're using I think they're using a Hard Ox 500, so that's one of the stronger alloys of the steels that are out there. But I mean, Copperhead was kind of the forks on Copperhead were kind of inspired by Scorpios. Just they do get under things very well, and we kind of wanted to do a slightly more robust, I guess, version of that sort of fork design that wouldn't bend up so easily. So yeah, they were using probably around 3/8, nice wide. So I mean, they have some strength to them, but we went ahead and used 1 inch thick hard ox, which is kind of unheard of in the sport. But you know, the whole design philosophy of this year was thickness. Everything's just thick.
Yeah, Copperhead honestly greatly confuses me because it seems to be armored in as much steel as Minotaur is in aluminum.
Yeah.
How in the heck did you guys do that?
Well, I will admit that Minotaur does have about twice the weapon power feeding their drum, so they did have to dedicate a little more weight to the weapon side of things. So that kind of freed us up to invest a little more in the armor, because you know, watching the show, you constantly see robots that are just failing due to structural issues or whatnot. We really wanted to build a tractor, something that was just not going to die. So
That's good.
That was the goal.
I think that's real smart because, man, a lot of robots just can't even survive their own hit.
Yep. And then, of course, I say that, and look what had happened to Copperhead. It just kind of died, you know. So obviously, still some gremlins to work out, but I mean, structurally, it's a beast.
Oh yeah.
No, in the competition, when your robot does die, like y'all's did, do y'all try to? I mean, obviously, you repair that, but you try to fix it or retrofit it or make it such that, you know, basically that won't happen again, whatever did happen? Or is it just not enough time for that and you just have to repair and go again?
Yeah, so the nice thing about Battlebots is it's filmed over about 2 weeks, and there's almost always a day in between every single fight. So you still got a lot of, you know, production TV stuff to get through during the day, filming post interviews and whatnot, but you still have a lot of time to pick over the robot between every single fight and figure out what exactly went wrong and what you can do to kind of fix it up. It's a little bit different from most homegrown events where, you know, you're trying to get through an entire bracket in a single day and you're fighting, you know, 5 times within a day. So
yeah.
Fortunately, yeah, there's quite a bit of time to kind of improve things between matches and figure out what went wrong. So there's definitely a lot of time in the test box for us bringing a new robot that was relatively untested, just because you only get, you know, 4 months notice to from the time you're notified that you're going to be on the show to coming on with the robot. You got to build a robot in that time, which takes all of 4 months. So,
yeah, it's really not a lot of time. It sounds like a lot of time, but I don't think it really is.
Yeah, it goes by fast, especially when you're dealing with, you know, custom manufactured parts in this economy. You know, machine shops, they're booked up for months.
Yeah, they are.
So you're coming down to the wire on a 4-month schedule to build a machine like this.
So you guys don't have a machine shop, do you?
Rob's got a pretty awesome hobbyist shop.
Yeah, I've got a few toys in my shop. We built Copperhead primarily in my shop. I mean, obviously we outsourced a lot of it, you know, the water jetting and whatnot. But, you know, I've got, you know, my Tormach plug for Tormach and, you know, the 3D printer and the laser and all that good stuff. So, you know, we have a few tools out here in the shop, so it helps.
That's cool. That's cool. How long did it take the tires to get manufactured? I mean, you know, from design... prototype, all that.
That laugh makes me think it was a while.
There's a story.
Was it 6 feet of tread that y'all needed to? That friggin' April Fool's video.
Do you want to tell that story, Zach?
No, I think you got it the best take on it.
Yeah, I I don't want to go into too many details, but this is exactly how combat robots works, because you're building everything as a one-off. So, I do a lot in product development for my day job, and yeah, you do a prototype, you run a test run, you do kind of a 3D print for the injection mold, you do all this stuff. It might take you like a year to really get something to market, but here, you're only doing one of them, so you just need to build one. And in this case, it took us a little bit to find someone that would do the injection mold for cheap. We didn't realize just exactly how much resin would be involved, because each one of these wheels, as Zach says, about 20 pounds altogether, and there's like 12 pounds of rubber in each one. So that's a significant amount of rubber that you have to buy. So just little things, everything kind of added up, and we were really crossing our fingers hoping that the wheels would come through at the last minute.
Yeah, we're managing so many different pieces of getting this robot together, in addition to, the TV production schedule and all of the information that they want, that you end up, accidentally procrastinating on something. And these wheels were one of them. So, yeah, they ended up flying into LA and getting assembled on the bot at the venue.
Wow.
Yep.
That must have been a little scary to kind of be biting your nails. Like, are we even going to be able to compete? Like, what happens if these wheels don't come in?
Yeah, and if you guys remember the April Fool's video and some of the other preview videos of Copperhead that I was posting, we had wheels on the bot, and those were actually just solid like tractor tire things, or cart tires that I got from Harbor Freight. They were like $7 a piece, and I put them on the mill, machined out the whole hub on them, 3D printed a new hub, and I spent probably half a day just trying to adapt pieces so that we could use a Harbor Freight wheel, because that weekend we needed to test drive. We needed to see if drive works, and you can't test drive if you don't have a wheel. So we just had to kind of whip something up really quick.
Wow, that's interesting.
So yeah, we didn't really see it drive with the wheels until what, Zach? Like maybe the weekend before. We had one set of wheels, like the weekend or two before we were leaving.
Yeah, Casey managed to get us one set, I think, shipped a few days before.
Yep. So that was the first time we got to see it actually drive with the wheels that didn't absolutely disintegrate because they were Harbor Freight.
Oh man, those burnout streaks in your driveway, those look gorgeous.
Yeah, we had. I think I posted that on Facebook, but there was a picture of right outside my driveway, kind of like in the cul-de-sac area, and it just looked like some kid took black chalk all over the whole thing. There was just burnouts everywhere.
Was there smoke coming off those tires at any point?
No, it just turned into powder. It was the weirdest thing. Like the tires are like half an inch smaller than when we started, and the rubber just kind of like flaked off. I mean, it didn't even smoke. It just like gave up.
Really goes to show these things are not toys. People on the internet, like y'all were saying, they think these are RC cars that are, a good pair of sturdy work boots. Stomp them right out, right?
Oh yeah, no, they'll take your leg off. Yeah.
Oh yes. They won't.
that.
They will take your leg off. They won't care about it.
Have there been any accidents that you guys know of in the sport like that? Somebody getting hurt pretty badly?
Oh yeah.
I would imagine so.
Mainly it's due to bad safety protocols. And you see that in some of the up and coming, regions of the world that are getting into this for the first time. I won't name specific names. Okay, fine, Rob. India. But yeah, it's just a lack of safety protocol. You see people experimenting with these things on camera, and you don't really think about, okay, the person behind the camera, where are they? What are they doing? How are they making sure that they're not, going to get hit by some debris or shrapnel, or have the robot come straight after them. So, and I've had a robot go wrong before too. Just we were testing. We had kind of a jerry-rigged receiver in the system, and it came loose, and the speed controllers lost signal for a brief second, and they just took off. And the fail safes weren't set to turn on for like 2 seconds. And 2 seconds, I mean, that's all you need for a robot to just mow someone down, especially if they're like trying to get a cool video angle, from low down up in front of the robot, and if it were to just take off, that person is just going to get bowled over. So definitely some precautions that need to be taken when using these things. I always get really nervous when we're doing a demo in like a parking lot and there's no curb that people can kind of just hop out of the way on, or because you got to think about all that.
Yeah,
when you're watching the show, you have this bot in front of you, even Copperhead. It's relatively small and it seems fine, but then you see it on TV and you're thinking, okay, so this 250-pound bot is going up against another 250-pound bot, and they're going to push each other. And, your hope is that you will be able to push that bot around when their wheels are moving. So basically what that translates to is a 250-pound linebacker being able to push you. And so, the thought is that if this bot, starts to run away, we'll just grab it or we'll stand in front of it and stop it with our foot. Well, no, it's made to push 250 or maybe 500 pounds. So, yeah, you're not going to stop it. It's going to do what it wants to do.
If it can push another machine, it can push you.
Exactly.
Absolutely. You want to talk about Scorpios briefly? Because we really haven't said anything about them yet, aside from their weapons seemed cool, I guess. It didn't seem to do a ton of damage, although I'm sure we're about to hear otherwise.
Yeah.
That laugh again.
Yeah. How do you want to talk about that fight? We did a couple precautions going into that fight, so you want to tell them about what we did, Zach?
Yeah, sure. So Scorpios has that new impactor disc instead of a saw blade, so they've got a lot more kinetic energy behind that weapon now that can get overhead, and a lot of times people aren't protecting the top of their robots as well as they are the sides, because most of the dangers come in horizontally or, right in front from a vertical disc, not directly overhead. So that was definitely a big concern for us. We're pretty lightly armored up top. I mean, I say lightly, it's still like a quarter inch of hard ox. But, relative to the inch that we have on the forks, it's something to be concerned about. So we at the venue, we had enough lead time to get an order from McMaster to buy some HDPE, the stuff you were talking about earlier, some plastics, really thick plastic. And we use that as kind of a shock absorption. So we actually put it underneath the hard ox plate. So if they were to get a good strike on the top plate, that energy is going to dissipate through the plastic as it kind of deforms and absorbs the blow. So after the fight, they definitely got some great direct hits on that top plate, and it was bent in probably a good half inch.
Oh yeah,
quarter inch hard ox bent in half inch. But the reason it didn't take out any of the internals because we had that extra, HDPE shock absorption zone that we put in there. So it definitely saved us from going out earlier than we did. No, that said, they did manage to nick one of the drive chains just like on the very tip of it. No damage to the sprocket, just pulled the link plate apart and lost a drive chain, and that was it for that side. And then for some reason, we were having some electrical gremlins on the other drivetrain side, which is why, the bot started not moving as well as it was at the beginning of the match. So we had to do a little testing to figure out what was going on there. But yeah, no, Scorpios, it's these overhead impactor robots are an interesting new meta, kind of something that's evolving with the sport, and there's a lot of potential for those to get real nasty.
Yeah, I can't wait to see how Sawblaze utilizes that. Robert has fought Megatron, Sawblaze's featherweight counterpart, with crippling depression, and much like Scorpios in this fight, it's a little hard to see the damage that overhead spinners do just on camera, especially from the Motorama covers, because it's just a guy with a handheld cam, right? But then in your fight report, you saw that the chassis was just completely mangled. Basically, it didn't get anything important, but those hits that looked like they didn't do much actually pulled apart big sections of the machine, right?
Yeah. And what Zach was saying about that Scorpios hit, if you watch the episode again, watch it 5 times, just, get those ratings up. But if you watch that episode, there was a slow motion of when we were kind of facing away from them, and the blade kind of came down on the back, and you can definitely see it looks like a nick on TV. But that was the little bowing that Zach was talking about, and Casey and I spent about 2 hours bending that out, and they had a 20-ton press there, and we're sitting there with a 20-ton press, putting pressure on that spot, heating up a little bit, bending it. And I mean, it took like 2 hours with a 20-ton press to get it back to where the screws would line up and it would get back on.
Yeah, you were maxing that press out, I think. So.
Oh, yeah, we were bending the frame of that press.
Wow.
There you go, 20 tons of force, more than from that little overhead disc. And I mean, that design of robot has a lot more evolution, so they're only going to get nastier as time goes on.
Yeah. Wow. I would never have expected that. The damage really just does not come across on TV.
No, it didn't.
I think it might be like, even with these good camera angles they have, it might be something to do with the lighting. I think it might be a little too dark to see damage in great detail, unless it's heavy damage, of course. I mean, it's not as bad as Robot Wars Series 8, which, I don't know, that arena seemed to be lit by, like, fireflies or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, people say that all the time when they go to their first actual robot event. It's like, wow, these things are a lot more destructive than they look like on TV, and they're just so loud. Like the impacts and the crashes. It literally sounds like nonstop car wrecks, and it just doesn't translate on TV. You don't get that same sense of the echo and reverberation. You don't get the bass of the floor vibrating when these things get tossed 20 feet in the air and come back crashing down. It's a totally different experience live.
I would love to go to a Battlebots filming someday.
I mean, it really looked to me like Scorpius did deliver that big of hits to you. I had no idea that they did deliver some damage, some real power.
So, what was up with the back of Copperhead's drum in this fight as well? Like, it looked like it had some stuff on the back.
Yeah, it did.
Oh, yeah, this is a story I have to tell.
Oh, no!
Yeah, so, somehow in the translation between SolidWorks and the computer machining, the drum got out of balance. So, the stuff you saw on the back was an attempt to balance the drum.
Okay.
But the problem is we had already heat treated and hardened, and when you weld on hardened steel, you risk cracking it, because as the weld heats up and cools and shrinks, that shrinking can actually crack the steel, because that shrinking, it puts so much stress. You think it's hardened steel, it's not gonna crack, it's not gonna break. It's so high strength once you harden it, but the act of welding on it, that thermal stress is actually way higher than anything you can do mechanically to it. So, I'm trying to be careful laying down these beads to provide some counterbalance. And all of a sudden I stop and I just hear fucking Rice Krispies.
Yep.
And that is crack propagating through the steel. It is just going to town. So I about had a meltdown when I started hearing that. I'm like, oh, no.
About?
Yeah, no, yeah. Rob knows the true story. So yeah, that was me rushing and not following the proper procedure, because you can weld on hardened steel. A lot of people don't know that, but you got to follow the proper procedure to do it right, and it takes hours and hours of time. We spent probably a full day. Once that cracking started, we're like, oh no, stop everything. We busted out the angle grinders and just started chasing after the cracks with the angle grinders. So I'm digging into the drum. We spent probably about $2,500 on that drum to get it machined, and you just hear the cracks going, and I'm sitting on it with an angle grinder for like hours, just grinding out the cracks, trying to catch them before they get all the way through the material. So we spent probably several hours. Rob was so gracious. Part of the procedure is to heat the drum up so that you stop the crack growth. Once you heat it up, it kind of softens the metal, so it's not as brittle. But we're at in a residential area. There's no industrial ovens, so I'm like, Rob, can I put this 60-pound piece of steel in your oven?
Yeah, cool.
And
So
Rob lives in a wonderful, wonderful house. He's got a beautiful oven, gas oven, top of the line. And he's like, yeah, Yeah, let's get it in there.
Yeah, we were sitting there. It was just Zach and me at this point. Everyone else had left, and it was just him and I building this thing. And that was pretty late in the day when that happened. And it's just like we're sitting there, standing around thinking of options, and it's like, okay, we got to put this in the oven. And thankfully, I had a lot of blanks from when I had water jet cut various pieces out over the years. And so we stacked up, I think it was a blank of S7 that I had. We put that in the oven rack to add some like thermal mass, right?
Yeah, basically just like erected this additional support structure in Rob's oven.
It's like a pizza stone. You want to get a nice char on the bottom of the crust. So yeah, we had like this plate of S7 to give us some thermal mass so that when we put in the drum, it wouldn't just shock it even further. That it was setting on something nice and warm, and the oven stayed warm, didn't sag too much. And I mean, that thing was in and out of the oven like 4 or 5 different times.
Yeah, that whole procedure probably took about 6 hours to repair.
Yeah,
it was miserable. So
like a nightmare.
Oh, it was. I had a meltdown. Yeah.
So Copperhead, probably my favorite drum bot this season. Only one problem, which is that you guys missed on a golden opportunity to call it Poison Arrow 2 Electric Boogaloo.
Well, I think Electric Boogaloo is actually already a robot.
Well, yeah, and ironically, it's owned by the guy who runs Scorpios, which is the fight we're talking about.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Nice.
Didn't he build a sequel called Electric Boogaloo 2 Electric Boogaloo?
Sounds like something he would do.
Yeah.
Why did you guys change the name? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Before going into Battlebots, so I'm new to Battlebots. Zach, he's done this. He's been there. But before I went into Battlebots, I kind of thought that you could just, name your bot whatever you wanted, but not really. It's definitely selection by committee. You have a lot of other people that want to have a say in what you name your bot. So,
supporters, family.
Battlebots.
Oh,
the finest creatives that Discovery Channel can offer.
Yes,
definitely had to weigh in on the naming of the robots.
Okay.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah, it can't be something that's already taken. I mean, unfortunately, the Marvel Universe has really destroyed most naming options because, man, they have created a lot of characters.
Yeah, we really wanted to go with Nightcrawler this year after the famous 80s hairband song. And we had the costumes already picked out. It was gonna be great, but Nightcrawler also happens to be an X-Man, so that was out for us as well.
And Mantis.
Yeah, Mantis. Yeah. Yeah, no, we had a lot of good names, but Copperhead is just kind of what everyone agreed on.
Yeah, it's the best name.
Corporate world showed up and wrecked your plans.
That's right.
No, that makes sense. That's the world.
So, would we like to move on to Bloodsport versus Lucky?
Yeah.
Speaking of naming, I think if I were a Roboteer, I'd be a little hesitant to name my machine something that implies that it has good luck, because of course everybody has been making fun of Lucky relentlessly since it joined Battlebots for its name, because it keeps losing fights. And going, haha, isn't it funny how its name is Lucky and yet it has bad luck?
Well, they had little wheels, I'll tell you that.
They had little wheels, and they made the choice for, I don't know why, but probably for weight-saving measures, to go into this fight without the back wheels attached, which was weird, but hey, I guess.
Had little wheels, very little tiny wheels.
Yeah, speaking of wheel guards.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think of what these guys were just saying.
Yeah. And they went with their puncher setup, which everybody loved when they first brought it out against Gigabyte, and I think it's a really good idea. If you got that wedge on the front, you don't really need the sort of scoop on the flipper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, against the spinner, it helps keep that from getting torn off at least.
Yeah. Bloodsport is a machine that I think has a lot of expectation on it going into this season, because a lot of people want it to be the next Ice Wave, because it's it's a very similar design, big overhead bar, small compact body. And after watching this fight, I'll say it's looking like they very well could be.
Yeah. They delivered some big hits.
It's a really good machine. That's the stability on that thing when it gets a hit is insane. It doesn't seem to move when it gets a hit.
Which is definitely a challenge with that sort of overhead bar style robot because they're notorious for being very unstable. Just the fact that you've got that long bar instead of a shell creates this form of gyroscopic precession where it'll get into this weird physics mode where things start, hitting this resonant frequency and bending around, and all of a sudden your robot just takes off like a flying saucer. Uh, it's very common with that overhead bar style robot, but they seem to have it pretty dialed in, fairly rigid, and I didn't see any of that action going on. So yeah, no, that at least mechanically that robot looks pretty sound. New team, so they're gonna have to deal with all the new electrical gremlins that need to get chased out of the system. But yeah, no, that opening fight was really awesome, especially for kind of a beginner group at this scale. They've been fighting in other smaller scales, but moving up to the 250-pound class is just a totally different set of physics that you're fighting against.
Yep.
Yeah, Bloodsport, if they can get that weapon reliability dialed in, then I'm thinking that they are basically going to be Ice Wave with their weapon being run by an actually practical motor setup with the ability to self-right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mark, what's his last name? The Ice Wave guy has said, yeah, we just use the engine because it's cool. It's not actually better. It's actually worse in a few ways.
Oh, yeah.
But
Zach or Robert, would you say electrical gremlins are kind of the number one problem people face with at least reliability or early failures?
I think it depends on the builder, to be honest. Some people have electrical gremlins, and some people have unrealistic expectations to their design, which
Okay.
you could say that's mechanical gremlins.
Yeah.
There's some people that just aren't really understanding what size bearings to use or what size shafts to use, or just the strength of certain components. I think electrical gremlins are big, but it really depends. I think if you're doing a brushless setup, you're probably going to have some electrical gremlins, but if you're going with a brushed setup, it's a little bit more straightforward.
Okay. Did you guys use brush or brushless?
Brushless.
Yeah, and that's just the type of motor.
Correct.
The modern era, well, I guess the olden times, motors used to be brushed, which they had this mechanical assembly on the back that pulsed the electricity through the windings so that it would spin. And in the modern era, that's all done digitally, electronically. So it's more reliable from a mechanical standpoint, but there's a lot more fine tuning that goes in on the digital side to make sure that the controller is getting the signals it needs from the motor to be able to turn it.
Yeah.
I understand. Did you guys have RC car experience before y'all got into robot building?
No.
Okay.
Did you,
Yeah.
Zach?
Not really.
Huh.
I mean, I guess I probably had like a Radio Shack RC car, but
But nothing high end.
nothing really high end.
Or a lot of the drivers, where do you learn to drive your thing, your robot? I mean, do you practice with RC cars? I mean, obviously you guys are building this thing, right up to the very end, and I assume a lot of people are. Where are they getting their experience and learning how to drive?
That's probably something we need to spend more time working on, actually. I'll be honest. We always build to the last minute, and then there's no time to test and practice and drive. I know a lot of people compete in the smaller weight classes, so they get some experience there and understand, at a smaller scale. Granted, it's different at a large scale, a lot slower moving, a lot more inertia, so you can't react as quickly. Some would say that's the benefit of driving smaller models. Your reaction time is better, but I see a lot of people overcompensating when they get to the big scale because they're used to driving something really small and responsive, and at the large scale, 250 pounds kind of just going to drift for a while.
Once it gets moving, it doesn't want to stop.
Yep. So I know like Will Bales, he was actually a big RC car guy. So I mean that's his design philosophy behind Hypershock is he wanted to build a giant scale RC car, and you watch that thing and it is super snappy on the drive.
Yeah,
He's got a ton of weight invested in that drivetrain to make it do that. And that's exactly how he likes it. So yeah, everyone's a little bit different in how they get their experience. I know a lot of people say they play video games, and that just helps with the eye-hand coordination, especially if you're playing like third-person video games. That's exactly the experience you're seeing in the battle box. That.
Yeah.
So it's
the
depends.
The Vasquez brothers just perked up the ears a little.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's
but
it's one of those
there's really no substitute for driving the robot.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you think, every single bot that I think everyone has ever built, it's like, I'm going to get this thing done. I'm going to bring it out to a parking lot. We're going to set up some cones. We're going to run some figure eights and really get it dialed in. And then the night before, you're like, we got to get paint on this thing and get it in the crate.
Yeah, if there's an overall theme to this podcast, it's probably if you want to build a robot, start early.
Yep.
Yeah, that looks to be a good theme. Are a lot of people, you pretty much said it, and it looks that way at least. It looks like a lot of teams are showing up and basically scrambling at the end to still get this thing finished.
Yeah.
Because you have lives, right? You have other jobs. This isn't your career, is it?
Yeah, no, this is the reason I have to have a career.
Exactly.
Just dump those truckloads of money into the robot.
Does y'all's family and friends give y'all a lot of crap? Are they supportive? Yes, spend thousands of dollars. Or are they, I always say it's like a musician. Everyone's telling them to go get a real job, Do y'all put up with a lot of that? I'm not trying to get you in trouble here, but...
Yeah, actually, no, I don't tell people how much I spend on these things.
Well, that's true.
It's confidential.
Smart. That's good.
Yeah.
All right, man.
Y'all want to... What?
Well, I got Bloodsport. First I thought their bar spinner killed or died after 28 seconds. It came back on a minute into the fight. They certainly delivered some big hits, man. They tore Lucky apart. That's what I scored it 7-0.
Yeah, and I don't think I can give Lucky a point. It was quite funny though how their flipper just kept firing at one point, just over and over and over again.
Did.
I thought they ran out of gas, but they used it later, so I was like, oh, okay. Well, I guess they got that figured out.
I think they're trying to demonstrate that they still had a primary weapon. I think they were just, you're sitting there and you're thinking, what can we possibly do? You might as well just keep firing the weapon to show that, hey, this didn't break.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that's exactly what they were doing.
Yeah, like for themselves, not for the judges, because I would think the judges just need to see you use it on the opponent
for
to know
everyone
that it works.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with all that said, y'all want to move on to free shipping versus Hydra?
Yeah.
The judges section before this fight was so good. It was so good. All right, 3 excellent fights to open up the episode, and then just the best judges section so far. They actually brought out Bronco to demonstrate its own flipping abilities as compared to Hydra. I was not expecting them to do that.
That was pretty cool, man.
That was cool. That was cool.
That was a nice segment. So I hope they do more of that in the future.
Oh, I loved that.
Because it shows real. People don't understand. No one, you guys know, but nobody else. I'm not even sure Ben, who's really into this sport. It's hard to understand what a 250-pound machine is, and the power of it, and it certainly doesn't come through in TV. It's one thing about boxing. We watch combat sports. We know when a dude hits you hard, it hurts like hell. But to see a machine flip a washing machine that we've all had to move it probably at one stage, to flip it 15 to 20 feet in the air, that's impressive.
Yeah.
That's what people like to see. People like to see shit get destroyed, man.
The force of the actual flip from the arm put a big concave dent into the washing machine from both machines.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. And you saw, and they did some analytics, showed some speed, some reaction time, how much time it was in the air. That was good, man. People like seeing that stuff.
Yeah. It was interesting to see, the two machines basically side by side in a picture-in-picture edit where you can see the very different design philosophies behind Hydra and Bronco, because Bronco is this really long locomotive-looking thing, and then Hydra is a much more compact sort of really it's got that nice looking wedge. Hydra just looks
their design,
so
man.
good.
I gotta tell you,
Hydra looks amazing.
Yeah, I did like their design, man.
It's so nice. And then when they were in the starting box after Farouk's intro with the blue light shining on him, it looked like the robot had turned blue. And I was kind of looking at it like, what the heck?
They might have that paint that kind of changes.
They did a professional paint job on that robot. It looks nice for sure.
It did.
Oh, yes.
And, I kind of agree with the owner or team captain of Hydra. You're going to run out, in my opinion, of evolution in pneumatics, that can only do so much with pneumatics, in my opinion. In hydraulics, I think there's a lot of room for progression.
Can Hydra flip an unlimited number of times?
Not unlimited, but they don't have the same limitations as air because I forgot exactly how much they explained in the show, but they're basically using a hydraulic system to, I guess, kind of charge a pneumatic cylinder. They can kind of just keep going. I mean, they claim that they can easily just flip the whole 3 minutes.
So their cylinder that fired their bar, we'll call it, is actually pneumatic and it's just charged with hydraulics?
That's my understanding. Is that how you understood it, Zach?
Yeah, they've got like an electric motor that's running a hydraulic pump setup that forces a piston on those pneumatic cylinders, and I forget how they release the energy, if it's like some giant butterfly valve or whatever, but they were definitely a little bit secretive of their ways.
Yeah, they were.
There's a brand new technology, so I think they want to get a little bit of runway out of it in competition before they spill the beans.
Makes sense.
Makes sense. So if y'all could help me understand something about free shipping real quick. It's got these wedges in the front, right? And they're hinged so that they can always be scraping the floor and have the best chance of getting under somebody, right? And of course, this is original sin, so it's got Gary Jin behind it. He's a robotics genius pretty much. But like each one of these wedges looks like it's like really wide, like 6 to 8 inches wide each. So with that said, how are they still so good that they can get under Hydra's also hinged but very skinny pointy fork in the front basically every time?
That's a good question. And that kind of keeps me up at night sometimes thinking about what's the best way to get under another robot, because I mean that's really the key to success in a lot of scenarios with combat robots. And I think it's just got a lot to do with physics and luck.
Does the surface of the arena that y'all fight in get torn up such that if you had a really low, wedge, that it would get snagged and impede your movement?
Well, that happened to Hydra in this fight.
Yep. Yeah, the Battlebots floor is actually 3 layers of 1/8-inch steel, so it's not very strong relative to the power abilities of these robots. So it's getting torn up every single fight. In between the matches, they don't show it on TV, but there's a crew that comes in with a welder to patch up all the holes and grind them back down because it's just getting torn up.
Wow.
So the floor is not the best. People think it's this perfectly flat floor. It's not. There's probably plus or minus half-inch waves and big floor seams that are getting caught up on. So you'll see a lot of robots this year are actually going for more ground clearance. A perfect example would be Minotaur. If a keen eye would notice that robot's a lot taller now.
Right.
That's because they added a ton of extra ground clearance.
Getting eye-centered this year.
Makes sense.
Right. So, and using a really sharp fork on that kind of a floor surface, it's kind of a crapshoot. Is that fork going to be riding along a flat portion, or is it going to hit a bump and get a little air time that someone might be able to get under a fork? And
But I would think that
it's very random.
But I would think that free shipping would be even more vulnerable to that because they've got the width on each of those wedges, which has a greater chance of catching one of those like uneven spots in the floor. But I guess Gary Jin just is a wizard, so I shouldn't question it.
That's right. And it might be a weight thing too, because those forks they've got a lot of mass to them, whereas Hydra's wedge cover things don't have. So that kind of helps keep the wedges planted, having that little extra bit of weight to keep them down.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's a multitude of factors, and it's something that I wonder about myself. What's the optimal fork design to always get under another robot?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine that's pretty important. Yeah, I've got free shipping, all over them, man, pushing them around, kind of dominating them. It seemed like Hydra started off slow and a little weak.
Hydra was really slow.
But, they didn't, free shipping really didn't do much. And then all of a sudden, man, Hydra finally got on him and boom, 2 big flips, man.
That
That
first flip from Hydra startled me. It was like they're both in the corner, free shipping's completely owning them, and all of a sudden, suddenly, free shipping's like 15 feet in the air. I was like, whoa, what the heck?
Yeah, that's some power, man.
It scared me. I was like, huh? Where did that come from? And then after that, it was all Hydra's fight until free shipping's lifter apparently broke and they got stuck on their back and counted out.
Well, they certainly got stuck on their back. I was thinking that they would fire their lifter and somehow flip.
It can self-right, but apparently it just wasn't working.
Okay.
Yeah. Which...
And I'm, and like what you guys were saying, we certainly can't see, feel, or hear on TV. I'm sure that thing crashing to the floor was loud and powerful.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You hear it.
Yeah. Well, Hydra took them out, man, with their pretty little robot.
Yeah, pretty little thing.
And cool technology.
Oh, yeah. Very, very cool design. I expect to see good things out of Hydra. And as they said in that pit section, Bronco and Hydra will be fighting this season. And honestly, unless Hydra can make its drive faster, because it was slow as molasses in this fight, it looked like, Bronco's going to be all over them, because Bronco's very fast.
We shall see.
We shall see. These guys have seen it, so they can't actually say anything about that.
I understand. They probably signed a contract about that.
Well, they did. They actually did.
I know.
Monsoon versus Ragnarok. Possibly my 2 favorite British machines this season. And I can't decide who I like more, although, Monsoon did take out Sawblaze last year, so... Then again, though, Monsoon has Rory Mangles on its team, so...
Yeah, well, it was a quick fight. I've got it at about 10 seconds.
What the heck was Tim going for with that heartbreaker thing? I didn't understand that.
Well, he was going to try to punch in and hit the batteries, I believe.
But, why not just have a sharp axe tip?
He clearly felt that he had inside information, I thought. At least that's what they were trying to insinuate, that he had inside information, and this was going to be the Monsoon killer.
Yeah, and he didn't get a chance. He didn't hit them.
No.
What's weird about the hit that put them over and got them stuck was that Ragnarok, right before they get hit, Ragnarok swings the hammer forward, full speed. Monsoon hits them, and then as they're rolling in midair, Ragnarok retracts the hammer at full speed, which I would think means that it works just fine. And they didn't get flung up very high, maybe like a foot or 2 in the air, it looked like. I'm sorry if that's just dead wrong. And then they land, and then the hammer just doesn't work anymore. It didn't take much to get that hammer to stop.
Yeah, well, and Tim's kind of got an unfortunately long history with that issue. We were with him at Clashbots in China with the precursor to Ragnarok, basically, and that even though they've got a brushed motor setup, that for some reason Tim has always had electrical gremlins that he's been fighting with those hammered robots, and I'm not sure what it is, but yeah, it's just it's frustrating to watch because it has so much potential, and something electrically is just not working right.
This like Ragnarok, I think I should give its design the credit it deserves. This is easily my favorite hammer bot ever built. I mean, first of all, it's gold, which just looks great, and secondly, that wedge on the front is 14 millimeters thick. 14 millimeters thick. I've never heard of such a thing.
Yeah, that's excessive.
Half an inch.
That's 0.56 inches thick. Yeah, this thing I think could kill Tombstone if their hammer doesn't die.
Well,
seriously.
Look, wait a minute now. If you can't make a robot that can last, you're not going to beat anybody.
But that's why I said if they can make their hammer keep working.
But that's huge. It's their number one. It appears to be their number one thing, man.
They had an Instagram post during filming of them testing the hammer, and their caption said we had some electrical gremlins and we're getting this thing dialed in, and then in the video there's a guy, I can't tell if it's Tim or not, who says that's how it's supposed to work. And I'm guessing that was after this fight, because that hammer in that video looked a lot faster than it did in this fight. Right. So hopefully it works for the rest of the competition, because I would love to see that thing get hits, because it's actually heavier than Beta's hammer. and seems to swing a bit faster as well. So
Well, they got flipped in 10 seconds. So
yeah, they did. It was amazing though to see Monsoon of all people get a full speed hit on the very leading edge of that wedge, which has perfect, like that should give them the perfect leverage to tear a big chunk out of it, and there was no damage to Ragnarok at all.
well,
It didn't look like it did anything to that wedge.
I'm not sure that we
Least
can really see
mechanically.
damage.
At least
Right.
mechanically, yeah.
Exactly.
Like physically, no damage. Lots of internal damage, clearly, because their hammer stopped working.
And honestly, that's what everyone's starting to realize now is people build their structures stronger, stiffer, more rigid. The structure's holding up fine. It's all the sensitive bits inside that are just turning into Skittles. So we were pulling electronics out of our robot after big hits, and you just shake them, and it's like a little shaker, little maracas.
Like a baby's rattle.
Exactly, because there's just parts that are just blowing off the PCB boards now. So I think that's kind of the next learning curve to be tackled with the kinetic energies that are involved now. Is you've hardened the exterior of the robot, now you got to harden the interior a little bit better.
Yeah, or soften it. Like I think
Yeah.
Ray packs his internals like as full as he can with like some foam.
Mm-hmm.
Because there ain't nobody who has to take hits more than Tombstone.
Exactly.
You would have to definitely, excuse me, shield your electronics some way. And I don't mean electronic shielding.
Yep.
So the next fight was Mad Catter versus Copperhead. Oh, sorry, Railgun Max. Very similar machine to Copperhead in a lot of ways, but also unique where it counts.
Mad Catter got their ass kicked.
Yes, they did. Those three pieces don't seem to be attached together very well.
I mean, Railgun would just destroy them, man. Huge hits.
Huge hits, yeah. Nice to see an egg
broke
beater.
in 2 minutes and 30 seconds, man.
Yeah.
They were crushed.
It's nice to see an egg beater actually get a hit for once. We really haven't seen that before.
Thing definitely delivered some blows, man.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they were structurally. I'm not sure Mad Catter was as structurally sound as
They were
I'd
hoping
like
for.
to believe, but they definitely. And I don't know where all 9 of their brushless motors are either. Although now they're in 2 pieces for sure.
Yeah, it's more like 18 brushless motors now. 18 non-functional brushless motors, I should make clear. What do you guys think of Railgun Max?
Oh,
Go ahead, Rob.
it's a great bot. I mean, there's a lot of, Battlebots has come a long way over the years, right? It started out one way and it's kind of evolving. And with other countries now doing competitions, it's kind of gotten a little bit more global. We've seen a lot from China, Russia, India. I think there's some stuff in Pakistan, Russia. I say Russia. But people are starting to learn a lot more. And obviously with the internet and everything else, and with people competing globally, that knowledge is being shared. So you're seeing a lot of people from overseas come out with some really solid bots as a first-year bot. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Wanhu looks like a good design. Its spinner only worked for a few seconds last episode before it got hit. Railgun Max seems to work just fine though, and like I said, we actually see an egg beater get a hit for the first time ever. So yeah, that's all satisfying. I mean, I think the worst thing about this and the previous fight is that it fuels Scott's delusion that hammer bots are bad.
Oh, it does.
No.
I was just fixing to say, has a hammer ever won a fight?
So far, we've seen 4. Sorry. So far, we've seen 4 in this season, and no, so far, none of them have won a fight.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of smashing something, but first, man, those guys are too slow to hit with things. Although, anyway, you got to hit.
Yeah. I think there's a lack of implementation to be desired.
Yes.
On some of these hammer robots. No one's
agree.
quite got it reliable enough.
Yeah, I think if nobody, I'm sure y'all have, although if you haven't, and I'm sure a lot of our audience hasn't, go on Beta's Facebook page and look at their CAD model of the gearing that they use for that hammer, from the motor to the weapon. It is just, it's a masterpiece. Like 2 snail cams, lots of down gearing, equals a lot of force on that hammer. It's just so well crafted. It's amazing.
On Mad
That's
Catter's
mechanical
No, on
engineering
beats.
porn.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, then you got to hit somebody with it, though.
Yeah, but Beta got lots of really great hits.
Well, that's good.
And Blacksmith usually gets a lot of hits, but it didn't manage to hit Quantum but one time.
No.
Because, some bullshit happened that they couldn't, foresee. So, unfortunate.
How do you not foresee a Crusher crushing?
Exactly.
Because you use AR-500.
No.
But then nobody knew that AR-500
splinters.
splinters.
I agree with Zach or Rob. I'm not sure who said that.
Robert.
Yes, man, you got to foresee that.
But Crushers generally suck. And I know this is Spectre 2.0 that we're talking about here. But, that was AR-500, which has never been pierced before by anything, I don't think.
Well, that's over with now.
That's over
Well,
with
it's been
now,
pierced by bullets, by the way.
It's been pierced by Quantum. Yeah, and Breaker Box versus Falcon was a frustrating fight, to say the least.
Yes.
Falcon, I think we can say easily the least of the Waiachi machines right now.
Well, they certainly weren't ready to run, man.
How does one have drive issues with two drums? I get if your drive isn't dialed in yet, but I don't think the two drums are causing that because the gyroscopics cancel out.
Well, now, were their drums not spinning correctly, or were their wheels not moving their robot?
I'm thinking it was that, because those drums looked fine.
Yeah, well, I thought he said he was happy with his drums working. It was his drive that was the problem.
Before the fight he said, I'm having drive issues, and I was like, well, it can't be the drums causing that. It just has to be that the drive itself is a little cattywampus for whatever reason.
Yeah, and
Falcon was an experiment from Waiachi, just kind of a quick, let's throw something together and play with brushless technology.
Yeah.
So this was their first foray into brushless, and there's a steep learning curve. And I think that fight demonstrated it pretty clearly. They were using some of the cheapest brushless controllers that are available, which are just not reliable. I think if they were to redo Falcon with a decent budget, because that was the other thing, Falcon was meant to be, hey, let's do something cheap, throw it together real quick. Don't spend a lot of money.
I don't get the welded on teeth on both drums. I think that would just be more work and it would be more fragile, especially since those teeth are going to be hitting at an angle that would be exactly orthogonal to the weld, so it would just break the tooth right off, I would think.
Yeah,
and
go with what you know. Right. They're a fabrication shop. I was talking to them, and I don't know if you remember this, Zach, but they were saying they spent $1,500 on that whole bot, which is just absurdly cheap.
Yeah. I mean, granted, they've got a whole machine shop at their disposal for free basically. So, but materials wise, I mean, they're pulling half-inch steel plate out of the scrap bin, and just throwing it together real quick. So.
Okay, so that's why both drums are not just milled out of a single block of steel.
I mean, I hear occasionally in some form, not really in this sport, that welded is stronger than unwelded. I mean, is that true? Or if you machine a drum out of a block of steel, is that going to naturally be stronger than a drum that has welded on teeth? It seems to me like it would be, although I'm sure there's a lot of variance in that.
Nuances.
I mean, if you do it right, welded can be just as strong as machined. Problem is, I work in a weld shop, coated weld shop. You got to follow procedures to the letter to make that happen. And, most of us are really more just hobbyists in our spare time doing this stuff. It's not professional level yet. So, yeah, I mean, at this point, it's probably a better bet to go with machine. There's less likelihood for things to go wrong. If you're going to do welded right, you've got to have, tightly controlled temperature. You've got to take x-rays after you've done the weld so you can find any discontinuities. And then, the repair procedures, if you do find stuff, it's a huge undertaking. So machining is just so much simpler and easier. It's why not? It costs a little more material and machine time, but it's just a simpler way to do it.
Yeah, it just seems like welding on those teeth. I mean, okay, so the black drum, correct me if I'm wrong, looks like it's asymmetrical, and the white drum is not. So that would be, if I'm right, that'd be 12 teeth to weld on to those metal cylinders in total. And just it seems so difficult to me to get the teeth perfectly in line to where it's functional and aesthetically pleasing, and also so that they don't hit those forks, that are coming out from underneath the drum, which is a good idea, by the way, but still, that's another thing it's a little hard to get right, I would think. And then, with 12 teeth, there's no way you didn't do a little worse on at least one of them.
I mean, but that's their day job. I mean, that's, Waiachi builds a lot of the stuff for other teams. I can't remember this year how many other teams they built parts for, but, a lot of the other bots, they're the ones building the pieces and the weapons for them. And, they're familiar with this. They're going to know how to jig this up, like getting those teeth to line up with the forks. You just make a jig. I mean, this isn't their first rodeo. They know how to do this stuff.
Yeah. I'll buy that.
Yeah. And there's a lot of cool ideas that went into Falcon that, made the welding a good idea, I think. So it works well for that style of robot, especially with the forks and the teeth interlocking like they do. So,
yeah.
Was anyone surprised that this was a split decision?
Yeah, I was going to get onto that. Let's kind of go through what happened in this fight, okay? Falcon got its ass kicked.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
It seemed to be barely mobile for most of the fight. It really wasn't doing very much damage. I would argue that Breaker Box, because it broke off those 2 forks on the back where the black drum is, it deserves 1 of the damage points. It was doing all the control and all the aggression.
I scored
it stopped at the
5-2,
end.
by the way.
It stopped at the end. So yeah, with that said, how is this a split decision? How? Seriously. This is so egregious to me. Like, are you serious?
What do you guys think, or do you want to stay away from criticizing the judges?
I want to stay away from criticizing the judges. The motto in combat robotics is if it goes to a judge's decision, assume that you lost. If you can't provide a knockout, you lost the match.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Well, split decision seems a little silly to me, but
I mean, you'd think that okay,
and
so
again, I think they should say their scores then if you're going to justify a split decision.
Yeah.
I mean, that means somebody, one judge broke from the pack clearly, obviously, and I think they should definitely give their scores then.
Yeah. We haven't really talked. We haven't said one single word about Breaker Box yet. I love that. I don't think I like this. It's definitely not as entertaining as Duck, just because it doesn't have as much personality. But to go from Nightmare to this is a big step down, in my opinion.
It was a weak fight.
It was a weak fight.
I don't have much on it, so let's move on.
I mean, Mad Catter, Railgun Max, and Monsoon Ragnarok had good hits in them. This had one good hit, I guess. There's a little bit of nice damage on that wedge, but not a particularly good fight. I think this is the dud fight of the episode, and what is otherwise an excellent episode with great hit sections and great fights. And speaking of great fights, we have a good main event. For the first time in forever, I'm getting what I'm dreaming of. I did not do that. I think this is the best fight of the season so far. Cards on the table, best fight of the season so far.
I don't know about that, but it was a good fight.
A lot of people have told me that they think Endgame Death Roll was better. I think, I prefer fights that go the distance, And this was such a good fight. I was so shocked that of all things that could stand up to bite for us, it turned out to be Yeti, a machine that has had no defensive capability whatsoever. And this year it does. Man.
I think
it was hype.
I think what you're seeing, because we were obviously in the pits watching all this stuff, and I think for this year, everyone was a little bit tentative because there was a lot of new bots, and the new bots were very high caliber. I mean, you look at Hydra as a new bot, Railgun Max is a new bot, Bloodsport was a new bot. These are all new bots that are also really scary. Typically, a new bot is, something more like an Axe Backwards or, even Kraken. Kraken's a great bot and I love it, but, these aren't going to be necessarily top 16 bots. But you have a lot of new bots coming in that can pretty obviously be in the top 16. And so everyone was a little bit timid. So if these first 3 episodes, you're seeing people kind of hold back a little bit. Everyone at the end is like, okay, it worked, and now I'm going to dial it up a little bit more. So everyone's just kind of tentative.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was very tentative going in. I was just hoping to God Almighty that Yeti was not going to die on the first hit, and it didn't. It lasted the full 3 minutes. And there were, I'm aware just from sort of, observation, there were 2 unstickings during this fight at least, where there was a little bit of an odd cut, and the robots suddenly came apart after standing still for like half a second at the beginning of that shot. Yeah, they did, and it was like some guys after, like I guessed that, and then some guys afterwards said, yeah, they were 2 unstickings, okay. And apparently during the unstickings, like they were like using a crowbar, and the crowd started.
That seems to me they should just say, okay, we got to.
Would this fight have been nearly as good if they had shown the unstickings, though?
You don't got to show the unstickings, but pretending it didn't happen pisses me off.
It definitely pissed me off in the Quantum Blacksmith fight, but like you said earlier,
I say just say, got to unstick them. They don't have to show that. I mean, it's just a dude with a crowbar. It's not that big a deal. But to make it look like they miraculously got unstuck, I don't like that, man. It's not genuine. Bite Force, pretty much tore him up. Although I scored it, I gave 1 point to Yeti.
For what? For control or
just something.
Oh, that's something I freaking forgot to mention in the follow-up, is that control and aggression points can be split, but everybody at the start of the season thought they couldn't.
Well, it makes sense that everything can be split.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there would be no points and no reason to have, 2 points for this and 2 points for this and 3 for that. It makes sense that you can split them up. I still scored it 6-1. I gave him 1 point. I'm not sure what I gave him a point for, but I gave him 1 point.
I mean, I think surviving a fight with Bite Force is worth a point in and of itself.
They did a little
something.
I think it was control. Maybe I was. They went at it at least. They didn't run. They survived. They went at it. So anyway, there you go. That's my take. Yeah. What do you guys think?
I thought it was interesting. This is the first time anyone's seen Bite Force do the crab walk, and if I was you, I would give it a 0.2 for that, because no one has really put any pressure on Bite Force in the last couple of years. So that was really interesting to see. There was a huge gasp in the pit area when we saw Bite Force crab walking, because you just don't typically see that. To see them actually damaged in some way was pretty cool to see.
A question that I have is that Bite Force's weapon, as I understand it, is not powered by a contactor that's just on or off. It runs it at around 170 miles an hour, so same as Copperhead speed. But they have the ability to kick it up way higher, because if you watch the Mohawk fight from Season 2 on YouTube, there's almost no death hum and no gyro dancing from Bite Force the whole fight. And then once Mohawk dies, suddenly that weapon ramps up to a much louder volume, and Bite Force does a victory spin, and it's gyro dancing everywhere. So I'm wondering, once one side of their drive died, why they didn't crank up the weapon speed so that they could crab walk a little more effectively with that vertical spinner.
I don't think Paul's used to having to crab walk. He never had to do it before.
Good point, man. Good point.
They're a very smart and conservative team. So my guess was that their thinking is, if you crank the weapon up to full, you have a dead drive side. You're probably going to gyro. Yeti could possibly take advantage of that, and then you end up upside down, and that's the worst way to lose. So as long as you're still on the ground and you have the weapon at a modest pace, they probably felt that at that point in the fight, they had already won it unless something bad happened. Turning up your weapon to full just makes that so something bad can happen.
Exactly.
What you're saying makes a lot of sense, because think about the final last year against Minotaur. As soon as Minotaur's weapon died, Paul turned off his weapon too, and just tried to win a pushing contest. And then when he realized he couldn't do that, he turned the weapon back on and was like, okay, clearly it's time to take risks.
You don't want to make things worse.
You don't want to make things worse, no.
I mean, I think that's the one thing that the I can't remember the guy's name. He was an aggressive driver. I guess he's an RC car, came from RC cars.
Will Bales.
Yeah, and he kind of makes things worse, by being over aggressive. And there's a saying, when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging.
Yeah. Although if you're losing really badly, you should probably you got nothing to lose. You probably should, kick it up to 11.
That's different. These guys weren't losing; they were winning.
They were winning, yeah. Although,
Sense.
of course, like we were saying, like we were talking about earlier, if it goes to the judges, assume you lose. So,
well, that's true. You should.
Yeah.
The goal is to knock them out always.
Yeah.
And that's why I actually, that's why I loved Railgun Max. Is that was a severe knockout, man. I like to see a good one machine destroy the shit out of another.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say it, I know it's, a lot of work behind the pits.
Yeah.
And I have a question for you guys when we get to that, maybe in a little bit about that, but anyway.
Yeah. You know what I think is one of my favorite things about this season and also last season is that no two machines exist that are very, very clearly the best, like there was in season 2. Because in season 2, Minotaur and Tombstone, it was so obvious that they were the two best robots. Everybody thought they were going to be in the final together, and they very nearly were. Now, of course, Bombshell did defeat Minotaur, but the important thing is nobody saw that coming. Everybody thought Minotaur was going to beat Bombshell, and there are still a lot of ways in which Minotaur is objectively still the better machine.
Now, that's you and the internet crowd, though. I'm wondering.
No, that was everybody, dude.
I'm wondering if these guys in the pits felt the same way on the teams.
Well, they fought Bombshell, or at least Zach did. Poison Arrow went up against Bombshell.
My point is, you're an observer.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, it's robots and the physics. There's so much, statistical variation going on with just the crazy, insane amounts of energy. So much random, chaos that you can have an objectively good machine and just something inevitably is going to go wrong. It's a constant game of, I didn't expect that to happen. So, it's really hard for, me as a builder to pick, who's going to make it to the finals. I just never know. It's like flipping a coin, honestly. That said, there's some very clear indicators of success. The people who are well prepared and practiced and experienced, they're going to be high on the list. But I mean, even Bite Force, in season, 3, 2, got knocked out very early because they lost the chain from a lucky shot from Chomp. So and
then the judging criteria was rigged. I'm not going to get into that though.
No, that's a whole different can of worms. Yeah,
that's a whole different can of worms.
But yeah, no, it's always hard to predict who's going to be the winner. I mean, there's some clear signs of success that definitely improve the chances. But it's always interesting to see how things shake out.
Yeah, I guess that's that episode. What were you going to say, Scott?
I was going to ask these guys, what's the scene like in the pits? And also, how do teams show up? Are they showing up with a team truck and a trailer with parts and tools and equipment and gear? Does everybody have to bring their own parts? I mean, not parts. I don't mean parts. Tools or tools provided? What's that like?
Oh, go ahead, Rob.
What was the first part of that question? That was a lot of questions in a row.
Yeah, it was. What's the scene like in the pits?
Yeah, the scene in the pits was pretty cool. So this was my first year being there. So thank you, Zach. And it was really interesting. It's a lot friendlier. So I've done combat robots before, and generally speaking, everyone's pretty friendly. But Battlebots was a bit different. I mean, everyone is just kind of like, hey, this is really cool. And even before the Scorpios fight, I mean, we were hanging out with them for, hours just, waiting to go on. And, we were taking pictures of them. They were taking pictures of us. It's a lot more, I guess, collaborative would be the word that you'd think. Everyone is trying to help the other team just get a good fight for television. We're just all trying to make a good television show and make good fights. So that was actually really cool to see that it was a kind of a collaborative effort even.
Yeah, all the builders, they want success for the show because then we get to do it and hopefully do it at a professional level someday. So we all want to see the show be successful, and the only way to do that is to make sure that everyone's in peak, robot fighting condition. So all the teams are helping each other out to get back into the arena, get fixed. And you'll hear that from anyone who goes there. It's just it's a great community to be in, just a very supportive community. I think maybe for TV it might be better if there were a little more friction between teams to crank up the drama a little bit, but it seems to work out, so it makes it a very enjoyable experience.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of an all-in-it-together feel.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's cool.
And regarding your other question, about, what people bring, things like that, they provide, there's some things like Tormach is a sponsor, of course, so they show up with their mill, and they had a lathe this year, and Lincoln Electric was there as well. I mean, you've heard that plugged all last year too. So there's a couple things that show up. There's a drill press. I think there was the 20-ton hydraulic press. But generally speaking, if you need it, you got to bring it. So we actually drove there, not me, but everyone else on the team drove there in an RV, and we had that thing fully loaded up with stuff. So yeah, any tools or any parts or any things that we needed, we had to bring. And I think we did what was the first couple days there, Zach? We went to Harbor Freight and did a Harbor Freight run and grabbed a bunch of stuff.
Up, yep.
Yep. Okay. So that makes it challenging because you have at least, 1 to 2 bots. You got 500 pounds in your actual bot. And then, if you need anything else, you got to bring that too. So you end up bringing, 1,000 pounds worth of stuff. It's a lot of stuff to transport.
Yeah, it's more than just robot building. It's, logistics, and how do you, have a machine shop at your disposal 1,000 miles away from your home base. So.
Well, that's interesting. Do you guys have, are y'all wrenching as well, or do y'all have, guys that step in kind of like mechanics, that do some of your wrenching for you, or how's that work?
That's an option?
Yeah, that'd be cool. I think some of the really big name teams can afford to get a little hired help, but by far the majority, everyone there, we're our own mechanics, we're our own designers, our own, fabricators, kind of do everything, which is awesome because you get to learn, you get a lot of experience that way, having to do everything yourself.
You enjoy that, nice. Correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so there'd be no reason to get into it if you didn't enjoy wrenching.
Yep.
I had something to say, but I actually literally just forgot it as I was opening my mouth, which makes me mad.
I have another one. What would you guys recommend newcomers? How would you guys, what would you recommend to newcomers starting out or trying to get started in this sport?
Start small. There's no reason to jump in big. There's a lot of great resources out there, and I'm sure Rob's going to take it away.
Yeah, I always have the same spiel because of my YouTube channel and all that good stuff. I get a lot of people, I want to get involved with this. Where do I start? And I always say the exact same thing. Step 1, go to robotcombatevents.com and search for an event near you. Don't build anything. Don't do any of that. Just go to an event. And even you guys, if you haven't been to an Antwave event where you see 1 3-pounders fight, just stop, drop, do everything, cancel this podcast, go off and do that first, because your eyes are going to be open once you see this stuff in person. Just seeing a 1-pound bot and hearing a 1-pound bot, that kind of gets your juices flowing. That really makes you like, okay, I'm going to build something. And, going to that first live event is huge. And then, as Zach said, start small. Start with just a 1-pound, 3-pounder, and let it get broken. Let someone just tear it apart and then fix what got broken, and then just kind of keep going that way. And eventually you're going to be, $20,000 in debt and realizing, why am I at Battlebots?
Or, yeah. You know what? That's inspiring. I think we should build a D2 kit.
Yeah, do it.
Yeah, that's a great experience.
Let me be clear. If we build a D2 kit, we're not entering it in a competition, all right? Okay.
Oh, you should.
If I won a fight, if I won my first fight,
that's how you learn.
Well, yeah, but I don't want to enter a D2 kit in the tournament though, because there's already going to be 6 of them there.
Okay.
And D2 kits are indestructible. Like if I built a D2 kit as my first ever machine, and then in my first tournament I beat Darkslayer, then I think I wouldn't feel very good about that.
Yeah, ultimately you want to. It's up to what you want to do. If you want to win, you can definitely do that. If you want to learn something, just grab some hot glue, go to Home Depot, get some MDF, and throw something together. You'll learn a lot. I started a long time ago. Well, actually not that long ago. Maybe like 4 years ago is when I built my first bot. And Zach and Casey, I actually worked with Casey, one of the other team members of Team Copperhead, and he and I worked together, and he kind of taught me a few things, and I built my very first 1-pound robot, which was Sergeant Cuddles, and I had literally 2 fights with that. I went to Robo Games. The first fight was a judge's decision, and then the second fight was like 30 seconds, and I got knocked out. And I learned a lot in those 2 fights. I mean, I had spent months building this thing, flew out to Robo Games, spent all the money, and I got literally maybe like 4 minutes worth of fighting total, and I was done. And I actually tabled combat robots for like a year more until Zach and Casey brought a competition here to Colorado, and I entered into that competition just kind of on a whim. Like, I'll just, I have this old bot, and I'll dust it off and bring it. You'll learn a lot by losing. And I think if you realize that losing is part of the process. If you never lose, you'll never know what you need to fix.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, just like I was saying earlier, just from watching your fight report from Motorama with the first version of Crippling Depression, like the stuff that you were explaining, I was just like, my mind was getting blown every 10 seconds. Like, I could never have imagined that this is going to be things you need to repair or to think about after every fight. Like every single time you opened up that machine, like everything you pointed at was like something new that you had to deal with. And I was like, geez, like, man, this must be so overwhelmingly difficult. Like, to a first-time builder, it must just be like, oh my goodness, I can't repair this, even if it's something that you could repair easily later on. I was a bit overwhelmed by it, frankly, and I do think I should start with an ant weight or a beetle weight, or the 2 of us if we ever build a robot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier and a lot cheaper.
Yeah. So I think that's about it for this episode of the Bedrock Engineers. Thank you so much, Zach and Robert. You guys were great. You answered a lot of our noob questions.
Yes, guys. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Zach, so much. It was a pleasure talking to you guys.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thanks for thinking of us and having us on as your first guest. So I look forward to seeing what y'all do in the future. And it's great to see that y'all are getting out there trying to start something with a podcast. And I think that's the key for anyone who wants to accomplish anything is just get started. So
yes, absolutely.
So go build some bots and talk about it.
buy a $25 mic off Amazon and call your uncle and be like, hey, do you want to start a thing? Hopefully he says yes. And I mean, this was a blast, and we learned a lot more and found out a lot more than we would have if y'all two hadn't been here. So this is my invitation to any other Roboteers that are probably watching this. I know a few have. If you guys want to be on the show, then please tell us, and we will definitely invite you on. Doesn't matter who you are, but Rory Mangles and Jameson Go get priority. Huh? What? Somebody say something? I must have just been the wind. But seriously, I would love to have any and all Roboteers on this podcast. So thank you guys so much for coming. Great for Scott to be here as well. Great for me to be here, because this was a ton of fun talking about this stuff. So thank you everybody for watching. And also, shameless plug time, Robert Cowan, of course, has a YouTube channel. It's just called Robert Cowan. His face is the wonderful graphic that is the thumbnail for the YouTube channel, the profile picture. Yeah,
so
thank you
guys.
Check
it out.
Yeah, thank you all for watching, and thank these guys for being here. Good night, everybody.